Welcome to Unit 4 of Common Classroom Errors. It's great to see you back. I'm glad you're spending the time to watch these videos so we can clear up any small misconceptions that come up as we go through here. And we'll just dive in with a couple quick things for this unit. We start off with this word, and you might notice, oh, why does it look a little bit funny? I always want to remind you that Germans draw their ones a little bit differently than we do ours. So here we have the number 100, right? And I don't think the unit does a good job of talking this, but it's normal in German not to say 100 when you're using 100, but just to say 100. So if someone asked you what this number was, it'd be normal just to say 100 instead of 100. There's nothing wrong with saying 100, it's not breaking any grammatical rules, but in use in Germany, we'd really only use 100 if we wanted to emphasize the 100. Otherwise, for typical common use, we'd just say 100. Or if we had other numbers back here, if we were saying 112, we'd say 112. If you want to say 180, 180. But normally just 100, unless you're wanting to emphasize that there's only 100, then we'd say 100. This second part here, just two phrases that are on the vocabulary list: auf Kinder aufpassen, Nachhilfe geben. And I bring these up because what I find a lot of the times is people just put these directly into their sentences as is. So for example, you want to say, I watch children, then what I see a lot of is, ich auf Kinder aufpassen. And we have all the right words, but they're not quite being used correctly in the right order. Or if someone wants to say, I give tutoring, or I tutor people, I see, ich Nachhilfe geben. And we're just sort of putting these phrases exactly in word for word to our work. And that's not the way that the vocabulary list is really meant to be used. This is meant to give you all the information you need, but you might need to move things around depending on how the sentence is given or is created. If you want to say, I tutor people, or I tutor, maybe the closest translation, we might just say, ich gebe Nachhilfe. If you remember the Unit 3 Common Classroom Errors video, I talked a little bit about word order. But the main idea with a German statement is we're putting the verb second, so we need to move this. It's the same thing with this one, watching children. The difference is this is also a separable prefix. You might remember those from the 2A semester. So it sounds a little bit funny because we're going to have two different aufs in here too, right? So we're going to say, ich passe, so here's our verb, right? Ich passe auf Kinder auf. And it does have those two aufs, which sounds a little bit funny, but we want to include both those. Ich passe auf Kinder auf. And we could also use it in other ways. It might appear this way, or in this order in the sentence. If we want to say, I need to watch children, like let's say that's your job after school until your parents get home, we could say, ich muss auf Kinder aufpassen. But we just need to be aware we might need to move the different elements of the phrases in the vocabulary list around. I wanted to give a quick look at some example sentences here too, just to give you ideas to help with the Flipgrid assignment. One of the question asks about how do you save money, and I think one problem or one habit that causes problems that people have is by thinking of the answer in English, and it's normal to look at that question and say, okay, how would I answer this? How do you save money? I save money by. But we don't quite know all the vocabulary to phrase that answer correctly, so it sort of runs into a dead end. So instead of starting off, I save money by, we might want to think, how can I include that idea in a sentence? So if we want to say, okay, I'm going to not eat out in restaurants a lot to save money. We could say, I save money by not eating out in restaurants. That's beyond what we could really do with this class. It involves a little bit of grammar or vocabulary that we haven't really gotten into yet. We could probably get 80-90% of the way there, but we're missing a few things. So we want to think, how else do I get that idea across? We could give an example like this: Ich esse zu Hause und nicht im Restaurant Geld zu sparen. Trouble reading at this angle, I guess. So then if we translate that, it flips things around a little bit, right? I eat at home and not in a restaurant to save money. So we're able to get that same idea, even with a little bit different phrasing. It's always good to think, how do I get my idea across, instead of how do I get word for word my sentence across. And it can always help to think, simplify, rephrase. What's my main point now? How can I How can I look at the vocabulary list and think of a way to get that across instead of trying to translate our thoughts from English into German? Sort of similar thing with the third question in the Flipgrid, where it asks about, what do you want your job to be? It's going to be a little bit tricky to phrase it in the natural way that might come to us, I want to work as this. So here are a couple different ways you could phrase it. We might say something like, Ich arbeite als, and that's like saying, I work as. Now, I don't think actually that als is a word that's been taught to you or a way to answer that question, but it's in this video, so if you're watching this video, feel free to include that. It's a nice, simple, direct way to state it, so I want to put it in here. We could also think, how can we do this with the wording that we've learned in class? We could say something like, Ich möchte ein blank job. Fill in the blank with whatever you want. Ich möchte ein Kellner job. I want a waiter job. Gets our idea across about what we want to be doing. We could also phrase that a little bit differently too, right? And say, Ich möchte in einem Restaurant arbeiten. So that's answering the question, what do you want to do as a job, by talking about I want to work in a restaurant. So we can answer that question in a lot of different ways, but I wanted to give you some help with that idea of just how can I rephrase this, how can I think about what I'm saying to get my main idea across. Be sure to let me know if you have any questions. I want to make sure you do, and awesome job.